Alright, so this is the second second video on polygon, and you should have already watched the first video, which kind of showed you what these different types of quadrilaterals are, right? So again, you got your quadrilateral, meaning it's got four sides, but then you got different types, and so that parallelogram, you know, opposite sides are parallel. A rectangle, you have opposite sides parallel because it is a parallelogram. But it's got four right angles. A rhombus, opposite sides are parallel again, but also all the sides are congruent. And then a square, it's a parallelogram because all the sides are the opposite sides are parallel. It's a rectangle because it's got four right angles. But it's also a rhombus because it's got four congruent sides. So square is all of these things above. We'll talk more about that in a second. And a trapezoid is kind of off on its own. The definition of a trapezoid is it's got one pair. It can't have more than one. Just one pair of parallel sides. And so that is your types of quadrilaterals. Now there is a kite, but we usually don't talk about the kite, and we will leave that out of here. And so the types of questions they ask you on AIMS for quadrilaterals are these questions that they say it's always, sometimes, or never. So let me kind of give you an idea of what these questions are. Let me get a pen here. Let's go get a pen. There we go. We'll use blue. Let's see here. And so your answers for these, and see how well my writing is with this, is they can either be sometimes, always, or never. And so we'll start with always. So it can be always, and sometimes, and or the other answer would be never. Let me put those down so we have those to look at. And so let's look at these questions. We're going to kind of fill in the blank. Now this isn't how the AIMS is going to look out. Since it's not multiple choice. We'll look at some multiple choice questions in a second here. But we're just going to do this to get an idea. So it says a square is blank a quadrilateral. And so we can either put as always a quadrilateral, sometimes a quadrilateral, or never a quadrilateral. And so the rule of thumb is you can just think about these and think, what does it mean to be a quadrilateral? Or it's got to have four sides. Does a square always have four sides? Does a square sometimes have four sides? And does it never have four sides? And obviously the answer would be always. A square always has four sides. So your answer here is, and since a quadrilateral only has to have four sides to be a quadrilateral, our answer here would be always. But another way, if you like memorizing things, and you can memorize this chart, one way to kind of think about it is, it says a square, so we start with a square, and then it is blank a quadrilateral. If you have to start with the square and you have to go up to get to the other shape, so we had to start way down here with the square and we had to go up to the quadrilateral. You don't have to go upward on these things. It's always. So let's see if I can draw a little arrow here, and we use a different color. If you have to go upward, it's always. If you have to go downward, we'll do an example of this in a second. If you have to go downward, so if you, let's say it was a parallelogram is blank a rhombus, you had to go downward, then that's sometimes. So if you have to go downward, it's sometimes. And then the never case is basically whenever you deal with trapezoids. We'll talk about that in a second. I don't have it. You can think of it as a side to side, but I don't want to say that because rectangle and rhombus will get you kind of confused. So if you can remember this chart, if you can visualize it, this chart over here, this one, then you can remember up is always, and down is something. So some people like to just memorize things. Some people just like to don't like memorizing. So either way you can do it. So let's look at another question here. It says a rectangle is blank a trapezoid. So a rectangle is always a trapezoid, sometimes a trapezoid, or never a trapezoid. And so here's kind of where the never case comes into play. All these things are never a trapezoid. They never can be a trapezoid. So usually, probably 80% of the time, if the answer we have a trapezoid, you're going to put never. The only time a trapezoid is anything is if it's a quadrilateral. So a quadrilateral is sometimes a trapezoid. A trapezoid is always a quadrilateral, but it's never a parallelogram, a rectangle, or anything. So a rectangle and trapezoid, those never go together. So we're going to put never here. The trapezoid and rectangles are trapezoid doesn't go with anything, so it's always usually never, but not always, but most of the time. Let's look at another one here. Parallelogram is blank a square, and so a parallelogram has to have, or I guess a square has to have 4 right angles and 4 right sides, and it's all 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. Sorry, and opposite sides have to be parallel. Okay, and so you can think of it. One way I like to always think of it is see if I can draw an example of a parallelogram that is a square. So like I could draw this parallelogram here. That's a parallelogram if you imagine those are parallel. But that's not a square, so it's not always a square. But let's say I did draw a square, and let's actually use the shapes that are on here. If I were to draw a square, okay, so that's my square. My question, for this to be a parallelogram, all it has to have is opposite sides parallel, and a square does. So a parallelogram can be a square, but it doesn't always have to be one. And so the answer here would be sometimes. And again, if you like to memorize these, sometimes it was down. So we started with a parallelogram, and we went downward to a square, and so that was it was sometimes. Okay, so a lot of people like to memorize it that way. Let's look at another one and see if I can make this more clear. A square is blank a parallelogram. Okay, so if we do the this thing up or down, a square, and then where are we going? We are going upward to a parallelogram, so it should be always. And I think this is a good way to memorize it, but again, you can think of it as a square is a square. Can a square ever not have parallel sides? And the answer is no. So it can't. It's not. Sometimes it's always going to have parallel sides. So it's always a parallelogram. We got 2 more here. A rhombus is blank a square. So a rhombus is here, and to get the square, we go downward again. So we're going to say that sometimes, right? And then let's think about it. So a rhombus always has to have 4 equal sides. And so let's see if I can do an example here of a rhombus. If they got it up here, I don't see one. But a rhombus could look something like this. Let me see if I can draw one. But it could look kind of like a diamond. We don't like to use the word diamond in math, but it could be a diamond. And basically what would happen here is all these sides would be the same. Now that's not a square because it doesn't have right angles, but it's a rhombus. But if I look at this square over here, a square we know has all sides congruent, so it is a rhombus. So it doesn't always have to be a rhombus, but it sometimes is. And let's look at one more here. There's a quadrilateral is blank a rectangle. So we're up here at quadrilateral, and which way do we go? We go down to a rectangle, and so our answer would be sometimes again. So sometimes, trying to write faster, you know what I'm writing here. If you can't read it, sometimes. But again, a quadrilateral could be a rectangle, because a rectangle has 4 sides. But a quadrilateral could also be a trapezoid, a rhombus, or a parallelogram. Okay, that's what the answer is. So let's look at 2 Ames questions, and then you can practice some of these on your own. So here is an Ames question from a practice exam. It says, which of the following is always true? So there's that word, always. And so with always, if you remember, go back here real quick, always means we're going to go upward. And so if it goes upward, we know it's true. So let's look at it here. It says a rectangle is always a square. So we start at a rectangle, and we need to go upward, but we're going downward to a square. So it can't be A, right? It can't be A. It's going to be a rhombus is blank a rectangle. A rhombus, are we going upward? No, we're going side to side. Rhombus rectangle you kind of have to think about, but that is not the answer. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. The next one, a parallelogram is a rhombus. So again, which way are we going to go from parallelogram to a rhombus? We are going downward, so it's not true. And so the last one here, it must be D. The rectangle is a parallelogram, and looks like the answer. We're going upward, so that's always, and that's our answer. Okay, let's look at another question here. Which of the following is always true? So again, it's always true. And so we're going to look at a parallelogram as a kite. That one's not true. We didn't put kite in here, but don't worry about that. So it's not A. A quadrilateral is a trapezoid, so to go to a quadrilateral, we're going downward to trapezoid, so that would be a sometimes. So it's not there. A rectangle is a square. We're going downward, so again, that would be a sometimes. And then D, the last one here, a square is a rhombus. That must be it. Square to rhombus. We're going upward, so that is always, so D would be our answer. So that's the second video on polygons. I believe there's going to be one more of these on the triangle equality theorem. And so hopefully this helps out a little bit, and good luck on your assessments.